Hello, friends, and welcome to the Powerful Podcast. I'm your host, AJ McCord. In this podcast, we introduce you to powerful women who are changing the game in and outside of their field of play. These are women's stories, women who happen to be doing things that many of us can only dream of, but the lessons and inspiration they share is universal. Hey friends, welcome back to the Powerful Podcast. I am so thrilled to be joined here by my next guest. I'm your host, AJ McCord, and joining me today is not just one, not just two, but going for her very third Paralympics experience. So she is somebody who competes in triathlon, and for a multitude of years, she went undefeated in every UTI race that she competed in. So this is somebody who in Paris has a chance to make some history and represent Team USA so incredibly well. Please welcome Allysa Seely to the Powerful Podcast. Allysa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
So I want to get into first, because the opening ceremonies are coming up like in 5 seconds. So you are already in France, and there's a chance we have to pause the podcast because you are so dedicated to your training and bringing home another gold medal. Please tell people where you are doing this podcast from.
So I am doing my pre-camp in Vichy, France. And it's this very cute little town. It has amazing cycling, and I'm at a training center here. So they have rooms that you can adjust the altitude in. They're called like hypoxic rooms. So we're able to set the room to the altitude that I live at. I live at a higher altitude to help with training. And so we have the room set at higher altitude. So you may hear it in the background, or you may hear it kick on in the background. I'll try to talk loud over it, and hopefully we can edit it out a little bit. But the purpose of that really is to just keep the adaptations altitude offers up until race day. If I was to go from altitude to sea level when I left about 3 weeks out, all of those adaptations would be gone by the time we hit race day. So now we're just trying to keep those to get all the way through race day.
So this is probably a silly question, but if you're at 7,000 in your altitude room, what are you going to be competing at? What's the elevation in Paris?
So Paris is pretty close to sea level, or
Okay.
When we think about it in sport, it's sea level. So Right now I'm sleeping in the altitude, and I have to spend about 16 hours a day in here to be able to keep the adaptations I have. So I'm hanging out a lot in my room, basically getting out to work out, train, get some sunshine, but spend the most of the time in my room. And but hopefully it'll be worth it.
Committed. That is the word that comes to mind, Allysa. I'm so excited to watch you compete in Paris in the triathlon, but I want to go all the way back to the beginning, because I understand the way that you found this sport was through a New Year's celebration. Tell us about how you got started in triathlon.
Yeah, so I decided a long time ago that I didn't like the idea of New Year's resolutions, because like they're just like a running joke, right? Like nobody keeps a New Year's resolution. And so I started a New Year's tradition that I'm going to try to do something I've never done before. And that could be a wide variety of things, from, in this case, try a new sport, triathlon, learn a new language, go somewhere new. So just like a wide variety of like doing something I've never done before once a year. And I think, especially for me, as somebody who like really likes schedules and patterns and all of that, like it's really good to just like step out of my comfort zone and like do something I've never done before. Sometimes it works out great, and other times not so much, and I don't keep up with it, but it's fine, because like it's all about trying and doing something I've never done. And so that is literally how I found triathlon.
Okay, so before we learn more about the triathlon, tell me one of the, because this one's worked out exceptionally well. This New Year's adventure that you've gone on worked out exceptionally well. What is one of the ones that you were like, okay, I did that once, never again?
So in college, I studied abroad. I lived in England for a year, and I went to visit Poland. My mom's side of the family is Polish. So I went to visit Poland, and it was incredible. I really enjoyed Poland, but when I was leaving, I got on the wrong train somehow, and the conductor kicked me off at like a one platform train station. So I was like lost in Poland and spoke 0 words of English, which is pretty embarrassing when you're like half Polish. So I decided I was going to learn Polish. The next semester I like signed up for a Polish class, and I tried so hard, and it's a really hard language. I still know a few phrases. I think I know enough to like get around now. I probably wouldn't get lost in the middle of Poland, where like if somebody murdered me, nobody would ever find my body. But yeah, it my brain doesn't work really well with foreign languages.
Okay, that's okay though. I think that's fine. That's a good thing to learn about yourself. And I feel like I do a ton of traveling, and so my goal is always at least to know a few things that like keep me safe if I need to, right? Like where's the bathroom, where's the food, where's the police station? Like I can probably survive. Where's the embassy? Like those four things, I'm probably pretty good if I can speak those languages.
I've settled with that as well. As long
Yeah.
I learn a few phrases every place I go, but that is about the extent of it. Like, how can I get around, knowing like where the train station is and what tickets are, and then safety, and that's about the extent of my foreign language.
Look, she learns multiple sports for one sport. It's okay that language doesn't quite come the same way. So, triathlon is what you ended up falling in love with on this one New Year's adventure. Tell me how you went from trying it on a New Year's Eve for New Year's Day, decision to then starting to compete in it, and then we'll get into how you became a Paralympian and one of the best athletes in the world.
Yeah, so I had like heard a little bit about triathlon, and it was at a time that I had gotten pretty burnt out with running and just running culture. Especially at the time, the running culture was very much focused on lighter is faster and starving is better. And I was just very burnt out of that. And so I'd heard a little bit about triathlon, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give this a try. Like, it seems like a fun new challenge. Probably hadn't rode a bike since like the 5th grade. I grew up in Arizona, so swimming is something that like we did every day all summer long, but I never swam competitively. I did like rec league in the summers when I was younger. That was the extent of like my distance swimming per se. And so like a week or so after New Year's passed, I got a postcard in the mail. And yes, for our younger listeners, that is how old I am. I got like a literal postcard in the mail. Um,
There's nothing
and
wrong
it
with
was
that.
addressed.
I still send letters. I'm so old school. I still send letters. You're gonna get a letter after this. So like it still
Getting
happens.
nothing beats getting a letter, right? Like, I'm sorry, an email is not the same. Getting an email, I'm just like, oh, another email. But
It's
like
work.
a letter in the mail, you're like, this is great. So I
Yeah.
got that postcard, and I was like, this is a sign, I'm doing it. And so I signed up for the triathlon, and that was like, the rest is pretty much history. I did my first triathlon on a Craigslist bike I got. It was from like, the bike was from like the 1970s. I, swam in the lake. It was like the first time I'd ever done any sort of like swimming race. I biked and I ran, and I get to the end. I won my age group, and all in all, like, I just had so much fun. And then I crashed the rest of the day. I took like a 2-hour nap. I
It's a
was
lot.
I was so undertrained. Like, definitely did not know what I was doing. I was just like winging it, but I had so much fun because it was a new challenge, like something that when I started, I like truly didn't know if I would finish it or not. Like, I didn't know if I could do it. And like that to me was like thrilling. Like, this idea of like, you have no idea how this is going to turn out. And in the end I fell in love with it. And so I joined our the ASU triathlon team, and I competed with them for a while. Unfortunately, not too long after I did that first triathlon, I started having neurological symptoms, and it changed the course of my life.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because that was in 2010. So what did your first triathlon was like 08, 09?
2008, yeah.
Okay, 2008. And then 2 years later, everything changes. Tell us what happened in 2010.
Yeah, so not long after I did my first triathlon, I started having a lot of neurological symptoms. Like I said, I started getting numbness and tingling in my arms and legs. I started having trouble walking. I had this constant headache for almost 2 years that just would not go away. And I went from being that nationally ranked triathlete to sleeping nearly 20 hours a day. And I bounced around from doctor to doctor, specialist to specialist. I was in and out of the hospital constantly. And at the time, I was really, for a long time, I was embarrassed to say it, but I was just gaslit by the medical world. I was told that it was because I took on too much as a young female, and I must just be anxiety or must just be stress. And it got to a point that I went to an appointment, and at 19 years old by myself, I went to an appointment, and the doctor just looked me in the eye and said, if you keep progressing like this, you'll be lucky to make it to October. And that was 2 months later. And I was by myself. I had no family or friend or anybody with me. And I drove home, and then I sat on my bathroom floor, just like at a loss for words. I didn't know what to do. And so at that point, I just like started crying, and my friend called me and she said, if that's really true, if you have 2 months, are you going to spend it sitting on your bathroom floor?
Mhm.
And in that moment, I was like, you're right. I'm not going to do that. And so that night I decided to request all of my medical records, and I got nearly 7,000 pages of medical records and started looking through to find something, to find anything. I don't know what I was looking for at the beginning. Every single word I didn't know, I Googled, I read articles, I read everything I possibly could. And eventually I finally found the diagnosis at about 2 a.m. in the middle of the night one night. The next morning, I was all night was waiting until 8 a.m. for an office that had opened. And I call that office, who was a specialist in the diagnosis I found in the chart. And I just started asking the first person to answer the phone questions, and they're like, hold on one second, let me get the nurse for you. And so then I talked to the nurse, and I'm asking her these questions, and then she's like, wait a second, can you just read the MRI report for me? And I was like, okay. So I read the MRI, like the part of the MRI report she wanted, and then she's like, hold on one moment. And so she puts me on hold, and all of a sudden there's the doctor on the phone, and he was like, how soon can you come in? And that was kind of the start of my journey through diagnosis, disability, and beyond.
Wow. I think first, I just want to honor the bravery of you as an 18 or 19-year-old to refuse to take no as an answer, or to refuse to take I don't know as an answer. I mean, that is so hard to do in every aspect of your life, but certainly for most of us in the medical field, right? That's such a hard space to feel like, you have any idea what's going on, because the words are so big and nobody knows it. How did you fight for that? How did you learn to fight for yourself in such a way?
I think it was a huge lesson in learning to advocate for myself. I think all of us are conditioned that, we don't really question authority. Like, it's not our role to question authority. And in a lot of spaces, authority means somebody who is more educated than you, or a uh, a professional in their field. And so, right, like, your medical doctors are a figure of authority in our lives. And I think learning to question authority was a really hard concept for me at first, but it had gotten to a point that it really was life or death. And if nobody else was going to show up for me, the only choice I had was to show up for myself and to advocate for myself. And it really started just by asking questions and not taking I don't know for an answer, or you must just be anxious, or, or you have too much on your plate. And it's like, no, I've always had this much on my plate, and these things have never happened.
Yeah.
I don't feel anxious. I've talked to my friends that have anxiety about what that feels like, and I don't have those sensations. And so just really not allowing them to dismiss me. And then finally finding enough knowledge to pose very educated questions so that I couldn't be ignored as a young, irrational woman. And I think that was one of the most powerful lessons I've learned, something I've had to do multiple times in sport and in the world since. And to be able to learn that at 19, even though it was a terrible way to learn it, I think learning it then was a huge benefit. It has not made any of this journey necessarily easier,
Yeah.
but it definitely has kept me alive.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I just think That is so incredible, and it almost makes like the resilience that you showed after your diagnosis like so almost like a foregone conclusion because that's who you are. Like you did the hardest thing, which actually wasn't living with the diagnosis. It was fighting to get diagnosed so you could live. And that was the true test of resilience, and you went for it with flying colors. And so then you get diagnosed with a multitude of things. And how do those diagnoses
Diagnosis.
um diagnoses, thank you, how do those diagnoses affect your life?
Um, so I was diagnosed with a Chiari malformation, basilar invagination, and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome with a cascade of secondary conditions. So those are like my primary diagnosis, or if you think of an umbrella, the ones like at the top. And then you have these like cascading diagnoses, which are the effects from those. And so first things first on the table was brain surgery. So I had, not long after getting the diagnosis, I had brain and spine surgery to stabilize both my brain and my spinal cord. So Chiari malformation essentially is a malformation of the back of your skull, and where your brain meets your brainstem. And so I had a portion of my cerebellum in protruding from my skull into my spinal column, which puts pressure on both the brain and the spine. So you got symptoms of both a brain, like neurological symptoms from both the brain and the spine, which I think looking back is what was like perplexing so many providers and maybe making them think that I was, in quotations, doing it for attention, or it was all psychosomatic and I was making it up, and some of the other things I heard. We were getting like varying competing problems basically, because problems in the brain and the spinal cord show up very differently.
Right.
But I was having a problem with both. And so with the brain protruding, there was pressure building on the brain, which is causing problems in both my brain and spine. So first things first was brain and spine surgery. I had that in August 10th of 2010, and then spent quite a while in the neuro ICU and then neuro rehab and then physical therapy or outpatient rehab for hours and hours a day. So that was kind of the introduction to like, oh, this is what disability is like.
19 years old, here's brain surgery.
Yeah, I'd already developed a lot of the disabling symptoms by that point because of the delay in diagnosis, but that's kind of the date that I mark as like that was the day I became disabled, because that was the day we knew it wasn't going away. And so from there, it was really just like kind of fighting for everything I had left and trying to make any progress we could. And one of the things I was unwilling to give up was sport. I wanted nothing more than to be back running, swimming, cycling. And at the time, I like competing or being competitive wasn't really on my mind. I wanted to compete in collegiate national championships. I'd missed it the year before because of everything that had gone on, and I just really wanted to be there. I knew I wasn't going to be as competitive as I once would have been able to, but I wanted to be there. I wanted to experience it, and I wanted to run again.
And so walk me through then after that, because you have actually changed classifications since then, right? So you've gone through first competing in one class during not during the Paralympics, but during triathlons around the world, and then you changed classifications in 2015. So walk me through how from that first did you make it to NSSA?
I did make it to collegiate national championships. I was the first athlete that we know of with a disability to compete in collegiate national championships. So 8 months after my surgery, I somehow managed to swim, bike, and run I swam a mile, ran 24, and then rode 24, and then ran 6.2 miles. So somehow made it there. I definitely was not first. I was much closer to last than I was used to, but still to this day, like, is one of the races that mean the most to me in the world. And so that was pretty incredible. But going to our classification, I had never heard of the Paralympics at that point. I had never heard of paratriathlon. And I was approached at that event by USA Triathlon, and they were like, "Hey, have you ever heard of this thing called Paratriathlon?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." And they're like, "You should really come to national championships." And I was like, "That's great. I'm competing with my collegiate team. Like, I don't need that." And then I didn't really do anything with it until a coach, my collegiate coach, actually had looked more into it a few years later in 2012 and suggested that I give it a try. And so that is when I first started. It was when I first did paratriathlon. And so you get classified, or classification for our listeners that don't understand is basically a system that tries to level the playing field, because not all disabilities affect individuals the same. So you obviously have people who use wheelchair with visual impairments, or in my case have like a neurological disability and amputation. And so when I was classified in 2012, we were using one system of classification. And then we found out in 2014 that paratriathlon got into the Paralympic Games for the first time in 2016. And in doing so, the classification system was updated, which led to a new classification. I was one of the first athletes being classified. Like, I think they said like number 3 or something. And being that I do have a more complicated classification, many athletes competing have, like a very cut and dry, they're just an amputee, or they're just visually impaired or blind, or they are a wheelchair user. They're very cut and dry, but mine is not, because I have both a neurological injury and an amputation. And so I was classified at that event. And then about a year later, we got a call. Our team manager got a call from World Triathlon, and they had found an error was made in the classification process. And when they rescored it, they believed that I would be in a different classification than I was put in the first time. And so they asked to reclassify me. And so I was reclassified. I think it was in 2015.
Okay.
2014 was a new system. I was reclassified at the beginning of the season in 2015. And that's when my classification changed.
Okay, so 2015, you get reclassified, and 2016, paratriathlon makes its Paralympics debut, and you, Allysa, are the one who walk away with the gold medal. Just give me the experience in Rio de Janeiro.
Oh man, the 2016 Paralympics were absolutely incredible. I think special for so many reasons. I think the first being that it's kind of weird looking back and seeing. So I had been undefeated since September of 2015, but I was still considered like an underdog for some reason. Like, I was off of everybody's radar. The media, nobody was paying attention to me. Everybody else was like predicting other winners. Like, my name was nowhere being mentioned. So like, somehow I go into this event still as an underdog. And I'm just like, okay, well, I've always personally liked rooting for underdogs, so like, I'm okay with this. But I think being there was incredible. We went to Florida, and we had our training camp, which what I'm doing now in Florida. And the day before we were supposed to leave, a hurricane's coming in, and all of a sudden they're like, "We want to get you out today."
Perfect.
Like, we're worried flights are going to be delayed and there's going to be issues tomorrow. We want everybody on like planes as soon as possible. And so we're like packing all our stuff, getting to the airport. We get like basically rushed off and out of Florida before a hurricane hits. I never went back and looked if it actually hit or not. I'm not sure, but whatever. We got out of there. We get to Rio, and it's kind of all a whirlwind, to be honest. Once you get into the village, it's just like one thing after another. We check into the village. We were there. We do opening ceremonies, I got dressed, and I chose not to do opening ceremonies. I was the only athlete on our team who didn't do opening ceremonies, so it was like a little bit lonely and a little bit sad at the time. But looking back, I feel like I made a really good decision. Opening ceremonies, for everybody who doesn't know, they're Wednesday night. Games always open on a Wednesday night, and your commitment to do opening ceremonies is anywhere from like 5 to 8 hours of like standing on your feet and just like a lot of like hurry up and waiting and getting on and off in buses and like being shuttled around. And I worked with like my team that I was pretty close to, and partially because of my brain injury, I don't do great in like loud environments. It's very exhausting for me because my brain can't tell the difference between important sound and sound. So it's all like my brain is just constantly trying to figure out what, like I can't ignore any of it. So it's just like
Yeah.
constantly being bombarded in it. And so we just decided like it wasn't worth it. So I watched opening ceremonies like on a TV by myself in the village, and then just kind of went to bed. um, and then you move into like your course previews, your mandatory meetings, like equipment check, like so many things. So it was just very busy, and like literally like all of a sudden it was race day, and I was like, all right, cool. You know how to do this. And so we swam in the ocean right off Copacabana Beach. Again, pretty iconic. But we got on boats and shuttled out to a barge in the middle of the ocean, and we swam. For me, I came out of the water in a pretty solid spot. I knew the bike would be the toughest portion for me. My disability affects me the most on the bike, and so I knew that was going to be a really, really tough part of the race. And I went into this race thinking, as long as I can keep my competitor Haley in my sights, like I know I can win this race. And it was like immediately, it was like she was, a few laps into the bike, she's like 10 seconds ahead, then 30 seconds ahead, then 90 seconds ahead. And I was just like, okay, well, got to see what you have on the run. And I knew I was a strong runner. And so when I started running, I just like kind of looked up to the sky and was like, you're made for this. I have always loved running ever since I was a small child. And I was like, you were made for this. And so I just like kind of took off, and I was like, I knew in my mind I was going to do every single thing I possibly could to get into that first position. Like I wasn't going down unless I was fighting. And so I came out of the second transition where we changed from bike to run, and I was about 80 seconds back. And so I just like put my head down and went for it. And slowly but surely I was reeling her in, and I got to a point that I was not too far behind her. And I knew in my head, I'm thinking, okay, you have to decide now. Like I was running at a much faster pace than I thought I could maintain. I was like running really like trying to go for a PR. I was basically going for a PR at that point. And I was like, all right. So I hung back a little bit, far enough that she couldn't hear my prosthetic hitting the ground, to really like collect myself, collect my breathing, get my heart rate down. And then I kind of strategically, so when I passed her, it didn't look like I was dying. I wanted
You're like, this is so easy. I've got it.
Yeah, I wanted to be able to pass her and her question if she could hang on. And so I hung back for a little while, and my brain knew when the timer's right, and it was just like, go for it. And I would say within, 20 or 30 strides, I was passing her to take the lead, and chills went over my body. And I was like, nope, not yet. We are not there yet. We have like a mile to go. And I literally said to myself, like, it is yours to lose. Like, it is yours to lose. You cannot stop for one moment. And at that point, like, I just ran knowing that I was about to accomplish like something historical, something that had never been done before. And coming up to the finish chute, our finishes always have blue carpet on the ground. So coming up to the blue carpet, I hear a familiar voice just like screaming at the top of their lungs and screaming, you did it, go get that gold medal. And then that's my sister. And I look over, and my brother is like running alongside the barricades, like trying to push through this crowd of people, and then like tripping over things. And I'm just like, at that point, like you just have to like kind of start laughing. And so I see the picture of the finishing chute in Rio, and everybody thinks I'm like ugly crying, and I'm like dying breathing and like laughing hysterically at the same time, and somehow that equaled ugly crying.
Oh my gosh.
But it's like one of my fondest memories, and just like hearing the emotion in his voice, and like knowing in that moment like how incredibly proud so many people were for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That has me ugly crying, because I'm like laughing at the picture of your brother just like shoving people. Like, I don't know if you've never been at the end of a race, like I don't care how big or small the race is. It's always packed at the finishing
Yeah.
chute, right? And there's like all these barricades. And so like imagine he's like trying to run next to it, but there's like a whole line of people that are right against the barricade. So I'm just like dying laughing at that and then like crying at the fact that your family must have been just like, wow, we almost didn't have this, right? Like, I mean, that must have been such a moment of emotion when you crossed the finish line and realized everything that you had done and lived for and fought for.
It's actually, I've never really, only recently did this come up with my brother. I was sitting at my brother's house, and my sister-in-law is like, I know he'll never say it, but he is so incredibly proud of you. And I was like, I know. I could tell in his voice. And my brother and I's relationship has always been very competitive. He's always been trying to like be smarter than me, have more degrees than me, or do something better than me. On that day, he was like, all right, you win. I'm done.
You're like, this is my gold medal, bro. Sorry about it. Oh man.
But yeah, like I've never actually talked too much with my family about like how they felt in those moments. But our race was not televised, and so like all of my family and friends at home really had no way of watching it. So my sister ran around the course like Facebook living it, like, and I went back and watched it, and the moment she saw me pass into first, like her voice cracked, and like you could tell, like it's just like nothing needs to be said, because it was like so much was just said in the silence, right? Like so much was said in those moments that like I experienced my brother like tripping over barricades firsthand, but like I didn't experience my sister's reaction firsthand, but like hearing it, her voice break, and then the silence on the Facebook Live, like it's just so much was said in that moment.
Oh my gosh, I can imagine. That gives me chills. And now I'm ugly crying on the podcast. This is great. Wow. So, okay, so you win gold in Rio, you go to Tokyo, you do it again. Now you're getting ready to go to Paris and try to three-peat. Tell people, because obviously there's been so much attention on the triathlon and you guys swimming in the Seine. How are you feeling about the course in Paris?
Um, so we are swimming in the Seine. There's been a lot of attention on it. I'm very confident that it'll be safe for us to swim. They're not. Triathlon is very, very good in creating safety regulations for us athletes, and so I am confident it will be safe to swim the day we race, which is awesome because we all want it to be a triathlon. Nobody wants the swim to be canceled. But I think the amazing thing about Paris is like Rio de Janeiro was an iconic course. We're on Copacabana, like literally right along Copacabana. Tokyo had like an amazing, challenging technical course, but we were like out in the suburbs, so it wasn't like you don't have those like iconic Tokyo sites that many people know. And so with Rio having like an easier course and the iconicness, and then Tokyo having an amazing course but not being as iconic, like Paris is putting it all together. Paris, like we are racing downtown, we are racing in the Seine, we are racing down the Champs-Élysées, we are like with the Eiffel Tower in the background. Like it does not get more iconic than that, which is absolutely incredible. And then when you look at the course, like it is so technical and so challenging. It is it's got so many turns, it's got cobbles, it's got everything you could imagine. And I just think that's really cool to see how much courses in the sport have grown. In, 2 Olympic cycles, going from something that was like pretty basic, just like simple, not too challenging, to a course that is incredibly challenging. And it means that you have to be very fit, but you also have to race very smart. You have to be very technical. You have to have all of the aspects to perform well in this course. And you're doing it like in the heart of Paris, which I don't think it gets cooler than that.
And you're not gonna have to have sis running around the course on the Facebook Live. We're gonna be able to root you on in real time. So that's great.
Yeah. Everybody can follow along this time.
Oh my gosh. If there was something, before we move on to the next segment, if there was something that you wanted to tell that 19-year-old who was laying on the bathroom floor wondering what was going to happen, would she make it 2 months? What would you want her to know in that moment, having lived through the last decade since?
I think the one thing that I would want her to know, and I would want 35-year-old me to know, is that your tenacity and your voice is your greatest strength. The world is not ready for that. The world is not ready for strong, smart, powerful women to step up and question authority. But your voice is your strength. And no matter how many times people try to tell you your voice and your words don't matter, they do. Like, don't stop speaking. Don't stop advocating for yourself. Because all of that fight becomes worth it.
Wow. Yeah, it definitely does. I am just so grateful that you are willing to share your story, because I think that it is so universal. It is so universal to feel like your voice is not enough, to question your own knowing, and you never did. Or even if you did, you didn't let it stop you. And I think that it is something we can all learn. So I cannot wait to root you on in Paris.
Well, thank you. I think for me, it is very important to let all women and girls know I did question myself. I question myself every freaking day. I question myself every time I'm labeled as difficult or challenging or non-compliant or whatever it is. I question if I should just sit down and shut up. And I know so many other women do. Don't do it. Don't allow the world to silence you. I've had the amazing opportunity to be given this platform, and I think that's the biggest thing I want everybody to know is I'm not different than you guys. I don't hold some special power. I question myself. I mean, there's times I don't believe that I deserve a life as good as I have, or there's times I question my own knowing and feeling because so many people question me. I've been there, I've been in those shoes, but don't let that doubt from other people seep in. Don't let them silence you. Don't let them decide your future.
Yeah. Do it scared.
I love it. Yeah. Do it
Yeah.
scared.
Oh man. Oh, Alyssa, I'm so excited. Okay, we have to move on to our next segment. This is called Something to Sip On. It is brought to you by the Sports Bra, which is a amazing women-owned sports bar in Portland, Oregon, the very first women's sports bar in the entire world. And so I want to know this week, when we are sipping on the Alyssa, what is the mocktail that we are sipping on?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. This is great. I'm so excited about this. I feel like this is very epic. Also, my friend who lives in Portland has never been to the sports bar. And I'm like, how is that possible? Because I would have been there the moment I got there. So now I'm making her go for this reason so she can take a picture. Anyways, I think the mocktail for sure has some lemon, some pomegranate. Gotta go with like our sparkling water, simple syrup, and I think like a little bit of mint. I don't know. I'm sure a bartender there can make something of all of that, but like, I don't know, something along those lines. A little fruity, a little minty. Yeah.
So lemon, pomegranate, sparkling water. What was the other thing you said?
And some mint.
Some mint. Ooh, that sounds so refreshing.
Yeah. I mean,
they're gonna make something
when you're
great.
working out all the time, you want something refreshing. So I feel like that's a good go-to. Yeah.
That's perfect. Okay, so now we're going to move into our powered up segment, which is rapid fire questions. And if you guys have been listening all season, you know I disclaim this every time. I'm terrible at this because I try to keep it rapid fire, and then I just want to learn the story of the answer. So I'm going to try really hard yet again to say rapid fire. Okay, are you ready?
All right, you've got this. You've got this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, coffee or tea?
Tea.
Okay, favorite ice cream flavor?
Colorado cookies and cream.
Ooh, what makes it Colorado?
It's made with a sweet cream base instead of a vanilla base.
Oh, okay. I like
Next
that.
level. Next level.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay. Go-to meal before or after racing a triathlon?
Post-race meal is a cheeseburger.
Oh, yum. Okay, are you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird.
Nice. What is your favorite place that your sport has taken you?
Oh man, this one is always so tough because every place is a little bit different. I'm gonna go with Lausanne, Switzerland.
Ooh, okay. Wow. I bet that's stunning. If you weren't a triathlon, what would you want to be a Paralympian or Olympian in?
So I'm actually a two-sport Paralympian. Many people don't know. I competed in track in Rio as well. But if we take both of those off of the table, I would really want to do gymnastics. I really like the idea of like throwing myself 12 feet in the air and like spinning and flipping multiple times. We're dreaming big here.
Yeah, I mean, look, Simone Biles, Jordan Childs, Suni Lee, they all make it look heady, like they all made it look so fun. So that was my sport. I was a competitive gymnast for a long time. I can confirm it's very fun, also very scary, but very fun.
I mean, they make it look so easy, which makes me think I could do it, but also I know I can't. Like
but in this world,
yeah,
in this world we can. It's so good. Okay, what is your dream vacation spot?
Tahiti, actually.
We were just joking before we came on the podcast that if the Seine didn't work out, they should have just sent the open water swimmers and the people who were going to be swimming in the Seine to Tahiti, because that's where Olympic surfing was. So maybe next time. LA 2028 is where they're going to have some really good. Yeah, it'll be great. You'll be swimming like out around a pier or something. It'll be very fun. Okay, and then what is the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
I think the best piece of advice I've ever gotten was probably from my grandma, and that was don't let the world limit you. I think like she grew up in a world that told her who she had to be and what she was allowed to do, and she told me don't ever let the world limit you. And I think I've tried really hard to stick true to that, and I hope every young girl hears the same.
Yeah. Okay, my last two questions for you, Allysa, is what does powerful? This is a powerful podcast where we celebrate powerful women. What does powerful mean to you?
There's so many things powerful means. I think the first is being true to yourself, being authentic, using your voice even when it shakes, even when it's scared, advocating for yourself, and not allowing anyone to tell you who you are, and what you can or can't do.
And when do you feel the most powerful?
I feel the most powerful after finishing like a super hard workout on my own, knowing like I did that. I challenged myself, I pushed myself, and I got it done. I didn't need somebody there to tell me how to do it or when to do it or how hard to go. That's, I think, when I feel the most powerful.
I love it. Well, Allysa, thank you so much for being on our podcast. We are honored to have gotten to know your story better, and I cannot wait to root you on in your third Paralympics as you compete for your third gold medal. Sorry about you, badass. And then through all the rest of it too, because we know that sport doesn't stop every Olympic, every Paralympic cycle. And so we're excited to root you on for the rest of it. And thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun, and I really hope that everyone out there keeps chasing their dreams and reaching high, no matter how big those dreams might be.
I love it. I love it. I think that your story will inspire many to do exactly that. So, all right. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Powerful. We'll see you next time.
This is a reminder to check us out every Tuesday, all summer long, everywhere you get your podcasts. And if you really enjoy this and don't want to miss an episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button.